The Star Wars franchise has produced some of the most iconic villains in fiction history. From bounty hunters to galaxy-ending Sith Lords, there are dozens of them. And today I'm ranking every single one from least evil to most dangerously unhinged. We're scoring each villain on a scale that factors in harm, intent, sadism, and pure psychological volatility. Starting with the one who looks the scariest, but somehow did the least, Phasma. The coolest looking villain on this entire list is also the least dangerous one. Captain Phasma scores an 8 out of 100, the lowest on the entire roster. She's a First Order Stormtrooper commander, decked out in chrome armor that screams final boss, but the canon tells a very different story. Zero verified large-scale atrocities, zero ideological masterminding. She commands troops, sure, but that's about it. Fans have said it for years, the armor promised way more than the story ever delivered. She's iconic, she's aesthetically perfect, and she's basically a mannequin. But if you think starting at the bottom means it stays tame, the next villain on this list actually has a body count to back up his reputation. Jango. Jango Fett is canonically described as the best bounty hunter in the galaxy. Lethal marksman, total professional, zero ideology. He didn't care about the Republic, the Separatists, or the Sith. He cared about getting paid. And honestly, his crimes reflect that. Everything Jango did was transactional. No genocides, no grand schemes, no manifesto, just contracts and credits. But here's where it gets weird. This guy, this hired gun with zero political ambitions, became the genetic template for the entire clone army. His DNA literally fought the Clone Wars. Millions of soldiers, all built from one bounty hunter who just wanted a quiet life and a paycheck. That's an insane legacy for someone whose personal goals were so small. And speaking of legacy, his son Boba took that foundation and ran with it in a very different direction. Boba. Like father, like son. Boba Fett is a non-modified clone of Jango, raised as his own kid, and somehow became one of the most iconic figures in the entire franchise. But here's the thing, his research score is only 15 out of 100. That's because Boba's villainy is almost entirely professional. Bounty work, personal survival. No genocides, no super weapons, no grand ideological crusade. Canon confirms he survived the Sarlacc pit and later rescued Fennec Shand, showing a selective loyalty that most actual villains would never bother with. By the end of his arc, Boba is arguably more anti-hero than villain. He's proof that in Star Wars, the coolest armor doesn't always mean the biggest threat. But if Boba's mystique outpaces his evil, the next bounty hunter on this list has zero interest in redemption. Cad Bane. Now we're getting into genuinely dangerous territory. Cad Bane isn't just a bounty hunter, he's one of the most dangerous guns for hire in the entire galaxy, and he earned that reputation by specifically targeting Jedi. That's what separates him from the Fetts. Jango and Boba take contracts. Cad Bane hunts Jedi for sport. And let's talk about the look for a second. The wide brim hat, the long coat, the breathing tubes, he's a space western villain, and that's entirely intentional. The designers wanted him to feel like a gunslinger who walked out of a Sergio Leone film and into the Clone Wars. It works. He carries himself like the deadliest man in any room, because he usually is. He scores an 18 out of 100 here because his crimes are targeted and professional, not ideological. He's a predator, not a zealot. But if you think a cold-blooded Jedi hunter is menacing, wait until you meet someone who turned her pain into a weapon. Dryden Vos. After 3 bounty hunters, it's time to meet the guy signing their checks. Dryden Vos is the crime lord at the center of Solo, a Star Wars story, and he's exactly the kind of villain who makes you nervous at a dinner party, charming on the surface, smiling, pouring drinks, showing off his collection of rare artifacts in a penthouse that probably costs more than most planets. But here's the thing, that smile means nothing. Dryden Vos has a hair-trigger temper and a capacity for sudden, brutal violence that makes every conversation with him feel like standing next to a bomb. He's the kind of boss who will compliment your work and threaten your life in the same sentence. His villainy isn't galactic in scope, which lands him at 20 out of 100, but within his world, he's terrifying. And he's nothing compared to the hunters the Empire trained specifically to kill Jedi. Nute Gunray. Nute Gunray is the most boring villain in Star Wars history, and that's exactly why he's terrifying. He doesn't wield a lightsaber, he can't use the Force. He's never personally killed anyone on screen, but this coward in fancy robes blockaded an entire planet, ordered invasions, put out assassination contracts on a sitting senator, and helped launch the Clone Wars. All of it from behind a desk and a wall of battle droids. He's the corporate villain. the bureaucrat who signs the paperwork that gets millions killed and then hides behind legal cover when things go sideways. Every time he's confronted, he folds. Every time there's danger, he runs. But that's the trick. Guys like Gunray don't need to be brave. They just need to be greedy, connected, and completely without conscience. He's proof that the most dangerous people in the Star Wars galaxy don't always carry weapons. Sometimes they carry trade agreements. But if Gunray is the coward who enabled a galactic war, wait until we talk about the guy who actually led the armies. Syril Karn. Syril Karn isn't powerful. He's not force-sensitive. He doesn't command fleets or destroy planets. He's a deputy inspector who got fired and moved back in with his mom, and that's exactly what makes him terrifying. Here's the thing about Syril. He becomes obsessively fixated on catching Cassian Andor, not because he's ordered to, but because he genuinely believes in the system. He's a true believer in Imperial order. He finds purpose, identity, and meaning in enforcement and paperwork and protocol. And that's the real horror Andor is trying to show you. The Empire doesn't run on Sith Lords. It runs on the Syril Karns of the galaxy, the mid-level bureaucrats who keep the machine moving because they believe in it. He pairs perfectly with Dedra Miro, another Imperial officer who represents that same human face of bureaucratic evil. Together, they prove the Empire's most dangerous weapon isn't the Death Star. It's compliance. But if you think a man with a badge and a grudge is unsettling, wait until you meet the bounty hunters who don't need ideology at all, just credits. Dedra Miro. Dedra Miro is the villain that made Star Wars fans say, "Oh, the Empire actually works because of people like this." She's an Imperial Security Bureau supervisor in Andor, and she is terrifying, not because she has force powers or a cool lightsaber, because she's competent, methodical, ambitious, and she believes in the system with every fiber of her being. Here's the thing about Dedra. The Empire didn't corrupt her, it produced her. She is exactly the person the machine was designed to create. She doesn't chase validation. She delivers results. She's not sadistic for fun, she's sadistic because it's efficient. That bureaucratic evil is arguably scarier than any Sith Lord, because it's real. Fan reception has been overwhelmingly positive, and for good reason. She made the ISB feel like a genuine threat for the first time, but if a single ISB agent can be this unsettling, wait until we talk about the guy who turned an entire planet into dust just to prove a point. Shin Hati. Shin Hati is a loaded gun pointed in a direction nobody can predict, including herself. As Baylan Skoll's apprentice in Ahsoka, she's a force-wielding mercenary who fights with genuine skill and zero hesitation. She's loyal to her master, dangerous in combat, and clearly capable of serious damage. But here's the thing about Shin that makes her more interesting than half the villains on this list. She hasn't decided what she is yet. That's not a weakness. That's what makes her terrifying. A villain with a clear motive is predictable. You know what Tarkin wants. You know what Palpatine wants. Shin, she's still figuring it out. Her arc in Ahsoka positions her as a character in transition, someone who might follow Baylan's path deeper into darkness, or might not. And that ambiguity is exactly why she scores a 44 out of 100 here. No documented mass atrocities, no galactic scale destruction, just raw potential aimed at an uncertain target. But if you think an apprentice searching for identity is unsettling, wait until you meet her master, General Hux. Here's the thing about General Hux. He's not following orders because he has to. He's following them because he genuinely deeply believes in every single word coming out of the First Order's propaganda machine, and that makes him terrifying in a way that hired guns and opportunists never are. You can't buy off a true believer. You can't negotiate with someone who thinks galactic domination is a moral imperative. Hux is the guy who built his entire identity around First Order supremacy. He's young, fanatical, and absolutely convinced he's the most important person in the room at all times. His speech before Starkiller base fires is pure fascist theater, arms raised, voice cracking with conviction, addressing rows of stormtroopers like he's delivering a sermon. It's genuinely unsettling. But here's where it gets funny. His rivalry with Kylo Ren is so absurdly petty that it almost undercuts him entirely. These two bicker like co-workers fighting over a promotion, except the office is a planet-killing weapon. Hux thinks he's the engine driving the First Order. In reality, he's a cog who's convinced he's the entire machine. And that wounded ego, wrapped around genuine ideological zealotry, makes him one of the most entertaining villains in the sequel trilogy. But if you think petty rivalries are bad for an organization, wait until you meet the woman in chrome armor who made even less of an impact. Savage Opress. Savage Opress didn't choose to be a monster, he was turned into one. Here's the thing about Savage. He's Darth Maul's brother, a Night Brother from Dathomir who got selected for one reason. He could be broken down and rebuilt. The Night Sisters used dark magic to transform him into something barely recognizable. Bigger, stronger, more aggressive, and completely stripped of the person he used to be. He became a weapon. Not a strategist, not a schemer. A weapon. And that's what makes him tragic. Maul had cunning. Maul built criminal empires and played political chess across the galaxy. Savage just hit things. He was raw, unfiltered power without direction, and that's both his greatest strength and his biggest limitation. He could overpower almost anyone in a straight fight, but he was always someone else's tool. First, the Night Sisters used him. Then Maul used him. He never got to be his own villain. He was made into one, pointed at a target, and let loose. It's not evil. That's a tragedy wearing armor. But if you think Savage's story is dark, wait until you meet the Sith Lord who made even Palpatine nervous. Baylan Skoll. Most villains on this list want power. They want revenge. They want to rule something. Baylan Skoll doesn't want any of that. He wants to break the wheel entirely. Here's what makes him different from every other antagonist we've covered so far. Baylan is a former Jedi. He survived Order 66, picked up a lightsaber as a mercenary, and just kept going. But not toward the dark side, not toward the light. He looked at the entire cycle, Jedi rising, Sith falling, galaxy burning, repeat, and decided the whole system was broken. And honestly, he might be right. That's what makes him genuinely unsettling. He's not seduced by anything. He's not corrupted. He's convinced. His worldview is coherent, even sympathetic, and that's far more dangerous than someone cackling on a throne. He scores a 48 out of 100 on our scale because his confirmed body count stays relatively small. No planetary destruction, no genocide. But philosophically, he's the most interesting villain on this entire list. He's not evil because he enjoys it. He's dangerous because he believes he's the only one seeing clearly. But believing you're above the cycle doesn't mean you've escaped it. And the next villain on our list proves exactly what happens when someone with real power decides they're the exception. Dr. Hemlock. Some villains want to rule the galaxy. Some want revenge. Dr. Royce Hemlock just wants clean data. He's the Imperial scientist running the Tantus cloning facility in the Bad Batch. And what makes him genuinely unsettling is how calm he is about all of it. There are no dramatic monologues, no cackling, no grand speeches about power or destiny. Hemlock walks into a room full of clone prisoners being subjected to horrific experiments, and he checks his notes. He adjusts parameters. He moves on to the next subject. That's the horror. He's the mad scientist archetype done with total restraint. He doesn't see people. He sees data points. He sees variables to be controlled and outcomes to be measured. The clones under his authority aren't soldiers or humans to him. They're biological material for the Empire's next project. And honestly, that kind of villain hits different, because the galaxy is full of Sith Lords who'll choke you out in a rage. Hemlock is the guy who'll dissect you, write a report about it, and sleep perfectly fine that night. He's the Empire's reminder that bureaucratic evil doesn't just sit behind desks. Sometimes it has a laboratory wing, but if you think a cold scientist is disturbing, wait until we talk about a villain whose ambition was pointed directly at a planet-killing weapon. Ventress, Asajj. Ventress is one of the few villains on this list where the word villain feels genuinely incomplete. She's a Night Sister from Dathomir, trained as a Sith assassin by Count Dooku, and she is absolutely lethal. She scores a 33 out of 100 on our scale, not because she's harmless, but because her damage is personal and mercenary rather than planetary. She's not blowing up worlds. She's cutting through people one at a time. But here's the thing, the Sith didn't corrupt Ventress. They just gave weapons to someone who'd already been broken by a lifetime of abandonment and exploitation. Every single person who should have protected her either sold her, used her, or threw her away. Dooku was just the latest. When Palpatine ordered her death, Dooku dropped her without hesitation, and that betrayal is what finally cracked the Sith's hold on her. What makes Ventress tragic isn't that she did terrible things. She absolutely did. It's that you understand exactly why. Her cruelty has roots, her darkness has receipts, and her arc after leaving the Sith is one of the most genuinely compelling character journeys in the entire franchise. She earns real sympathy, which is rare on this list. But sympathy doesn't erase a body count, and the next villain on our list has one that dwarfs hers by orders of magnitude: Krennic. Director Orson Krennic is the most pathetic villain in Star Wars, and I mean that as a compliment to the writing. This is a man who dedicated his entire career to building the most destructive weapon in galactic history, the Death Star, and his reward was getting completely overshadowed by Tarkin the second it was finished. Here's the thing about Krennic. His ambition wasn't really about the Empire, it was about him. He wanted credit. He wanted glory. He wanted to be the guy who built the thing that changed everything. And technically he was. He oversaw the weapons development, he fought through Imperial bureaucracy, he strong-armed the scientists. The Death Star was his baby, but the Empire doesn't care about credit. Tarkin swooped in, took command of the finished station, and Krennic became a footnote in his own project. He's a middle manager of the apocalypse. He built the gun, someone else got to pull the trigger, and the dark comedy of it all? Krennic dies getting vaporized by the very weapon he created. The Death Star's test firing on Scarif kills its own architect. That's not tragedy. That's a punchline. He wanted his name attached to the Death Star forever, and in a way, he got his wish. Just not how he imagined. But if Krennic is the guy who built the weapon, wait until we talk about the man who actually pointed it at a planet full of innocent people and said fire. The Inquisitors. Here's what makes the Inquisitors so deeply unsettling. They're not random dark side users or hired guns. They're former Jedi. Every single one of them was turned, broken, and weaponized by the Empire to hunt down the people they once called family. They know the training, they know the hiding spots, they know exactly how a Jedi thinks. That's not just effective, that's cruel by design. The Grand Inquisitor is the most recognizable of the group, leading the charge as the Empire's primary Jedi hunter after Order 66. But it's the second sister from Jedi, Fallen Order, who hits the hardest. Her backstory is one of the most emotionally devastating arcs in all of Star Wars. A Padawan betrayed, tortured, and remade into the very thing she feared. The seventh sister adds another layer of calculated menace to the roster. Individually, none of them crack the upper ranks. They score around 30 out of 100. But collectively, their systematic, organized approach to exterminating survivors elevates them above any lone bounty hunter. They're not a blunt instrument, they're a scalpel. And every Jedi they kill is a mirror of what they chose to become. But if former Jedi hunting their own kind disturbs you, wait until we talk about a dark side assassin who never had a choice in the first place, Jabba. The Hutt doesn't have an ideology. He doesn't have a master plan for galactic domination. He doesn't even have legs. What he has is a palace full of slaves, a pit full of monsters, and a sail barge specifically designed for watching people die slowly in the desert. That's what makes Jabba uniquely disturbing. Every other villain on this list has some kind of goal. Palpatine wants power. Vader wants order. Thrawn wants strategic dominance. Jabba just wants to eat, laugh, and watch you suffer. His cruelty is recreational. It's entertainment to him. He runs one of the largest criminal empires on Tatooine, trafficking in piracy, slavery, and every illegal operation you can think of. He's a member of the Grand Hutt Council, which means his reach extends way beyond one desert planet. And canon shows him cutting deals with Imperial figures, including Vader himself. He's not just a crime lord, he's a power broker. But here's the thing. He scores a 41 out of 100, and that feels right, because Jabba isn't trying to reshape the galaxy. He's just enjoying the worst parts of it, and somehow, that pure hedonistic evil is more unsettling than half the Sith on this list. But if Jabba represents cruelty for pleasure, the next villain represents something far more calculated: Grievous. Most villains in Star Wars have the Force. They have visions, lightning, telekinesis, some cosmic advantage that makes them dangerous. General Grievous has none of that. He's just a Kaleesh warrior who got rebuilt into a walking nightmare of metal and rage, and he kills Jedi anyway. That's what makes him terrifying. Every lightsaber in his collection belonged to a Jedi he personally hunted down and destroyed, not with the Force, with 4 mechanical arms, cybernetic speed, and pure brutality. Each saber is a trophy, and each trophy is a corpse. As Supreme Marshal Commander of the Separatist droid armies, Grievous commanded entire fleets, but his real passion was always the hunt. He didn't care about Separatist politics or Dooku's grand vision. He wanted Jedi dead, and he wanted proof he did it. Here's the detail that makes him weirdly human, though. That signature cough, that's because Mace Windu Force crushed his chest plate before Revenge of the Sith. Underneath all that Durasteel, there's still organic tissue, still lungs, still something that can be hurt. The galaxy's most feared Jedi killer wheezing like he needs an inhaler is somehow the most unsettling thing about him. But if Grievous is a weapon pointed at the Jedi, wait until you meet the man who aimed him, Dooku. Count Dooku is the most sophisticated villain in Star Wars, and that's exactly what makes him so dangerous. He's not some raging Sith swinging a lightsaber in anger. He's a former Jedi Master, trained by Yoda himself, who looked at the Republic and decided it wasn't worth saving. And honestly, he had some points, but here's where it gets complicated. Dooku didn't just leave the Jedi Order. He became Darth Tyrannus, Palpatine's secret apprentice, and then engineered an entire galactic war from both sides. He secretly commissioned the Republic's clone army while simultaneously leading the Separatist opposition against that same Republic. Let that sink in. He built the weapon and the enemy it was designed to fight, all under Palpatine's direction. But Dooku thought he was the smartest person in the room. He genuinely believed he'd eventually overthrow Palpatine and take control. That's the fatal mistake. You don't out-scheme Palpatine. Nobody does. When Anakin had him on his knees in Revenge of the Sith, Palpatine gave the order without hesitation. Dooku was always expendable, and the look on his face when he realized it is one of the most chilling moments in the franchise. He's a cautionary tale wrapped in a cape, but at least Dooku only thought he was running the galaxy. The next villain actually did. Maul. Most Sith die and stay dead. Maul got cut in half, fell down a reactor shaft, and decided that wasn't going to work for him. He survived on pure hatred alone, rebuilt himself with spider-like mechanical legs, and came back meaner than ever. That's not a redemption arc. That's a revenge arc with a business plan. Here's the thing about Maul that people undersell. After losing everything, his master, his body, his rank, he built the Shadow Collective. That's Death Watch, Black Sun, the Pike Syndicate, the Hutt Clan, and Crimson Dawn all under one banner. He conquered Mandalore. A former Sith apprentice with no empire, no fleet, and no master took over an entire warrior planet and unified the galaxy's criminal underworld. But his obsession with Obi-Wan Kenobi is what makes him tragic. He had the power to rule the underworld permanently, and he spent it chasing a ghost. Every decision filtered through that hatred. George Lucas originally intended Maul for further use in the sequels, and his extended life through the Clone Wars and Rebels became one of Star Wars' best character arcs. He scores a 50 out of 100. High personal cruelty, impressive criminal empire, but ultimately more revenge-driven than galaxy-scale destructive. His prison wasn't a cell, it was his own mind. And speaking of villains whose ambitions shaped galactic history, the next one didn't need hatred to be dangerous. He just needed a plan. Thrawn. Every other villain on this list has some kind of superpower. Force lightning, immortality, planet-killing weapons, something. Thrawn has a library card and a really good eye for paintings, and he's somehow scarier than most of them. Grand Admiral Thrawn is a Chiss officer who rose through the ranks of the Imperial Navy by doing something nobody else in the Empire ever bothered to do. He studied his enemies. Not their troop movements, not their weapons, their art, their culture, their music. He would analyze a species' creative output and use it to predict exactly how they'd fight, where they'd retreat, and when they'd break. That's his entire superpower. Pure intellect. He was originally created by author Timothy Zahn for the Legends novels, where he basically single-handedly kept Star Wars alive in the 90s. He was so beloved that Lucasfilm brought him into official canon through Star Wars Rebels Season 3, and then gave him a live-action debut in Ahsoka. Here's where it gets complicated though. In later novels, Thrawn isn't a straightforward Imperial loyalist. Some stories frame him closer to a double agent, someone whose true motivations involve protecting his own people, the Chiss ascendancy, rather than serving the Empire out of blind devotion. That makes him one of the most layered villains in the entire franchise. But layered or not, he's still the guy who wins wars by reading a painting. And in a galaxy full of Force users and super weapons, that might be the most terrifying thing of all. If you think a tactical genius is dangerous, wait until we talk about a villain who had the power to literally cheat death itself. Moff Gideon. Moff Gideon's plan isn't conquest, it's a lab. Let me explain. Most Imperial Remnant commanders after the Empire's fall are trying to rebuild the fleet, reclaim territory, play warlord. Gideon? He's hunting a child. Specifically, he wants Grogu's blood because it contains Force-sensitive properties he can use for cloning experiments. He wants to manufacture Force-sensitive soldiers. That's not standard Imperial ambition, that's biological exploitation of a toddler. And he's using that knowledge to build something arguably worse than what came before. Then there's the Darksaber. He wields it like a trophy, but that weapon is a sacred Mandalorian cultural artifact. Him carrying it isn't just a combat choice, it's a statement. It says, I took your history, and now I'm swinging it around. That's conquest through cultural erasure. Research scores him 56 out of 100, and honestly, this is where the list starts getting into genuinely dark territory. But if you think experimenting on a child's blood is disturbing, wait until you meet the man who turned fear itself into official Imperial policy. Snoke. Here's a villain who commanded the destruction of an entire star system and still wasn't even real. Supreme Leader Snoke is terrifying on the surface. Towering, scarred, impossibly powerful in the Force, and sitting on a throne commanding the First Order like he built it from nothing. He seduced Ben Solo to the dark side. He ordered Starkiller Base to fire on the New Republic, wiping out billions in a single strike. He ruled through fear and manipulation, and every officer in the First Order answered to him. But here's where it gets complicated. Snoke was never his own person. He was a Strandcast, an artificial being grown in a lab by Palpatine and the Sith Eternal. Every order he gave, every manipulation of Ben Solo, every galaxy-shaking atrocity, it was all Palpatine's plan working exactly as intended. Snoke thought he was the supreme leader. He was a puppet who didn't know he had strings, and that's what makes him fascinating in retrospect. Fan theories spent years treating him as the next big independent threat. Canon pulled the rug out completely. Whether you think that's a brilliant twist or a frustrating retcon, the result is the same. Snoke wielded real power, caused real destruction, and none of it was actually his. He's the tragedy of a weapon that thinks it's a person. He scores a 60 out of 100. Galaxy-scale destruction on his orders, but zero agency behind any of it. But if a puppet villain unsettles you, wait until you meet the guy who was pulling every single string from the very beginning, Kylo Ren. Ben Solo is the most psychologically volatile villain on this entire list, and that's exactly what makes him terrifying. He's not cold and calculated like Tarkin, he's not playing chess like Thrawn. Kylo Ren is a live wire, and you never know when he's going to snap. Here's the thing about Kylo. His violence isn't strategic, it's emotional, it's personal. He kills his own father, Han Solo, on a bridge in front of his mother. That scene is one of the most gut-wrenching moments in the entire franchise, and it still hits like a truck every single time you watch it. He orders stormtroopers to slaughter civilians. He kills Snoke just to seize power for himself. Everything he does comes from rage, pain, and desperation. Even his weapon tells you everything. That cross-guard lightsaber is cracked and unstable, venting energy out the sides because the kyber crystal inside is damaged. It's a perfect metaphor for the man holding it. He scores a 62 out of 100, and yes, he eventually redeems himself. But redemption doesn't erase patricide. It just makes the whole thing more complicated. But if you think emotional instability is dangerous, wait until you meet the villain who turned emotion into an entire empire of fear, Tarkin. Let me be clear about something. Every villain we've talked about so far has some kind of excuse. Anger, trauma, manipulation, survival. Grand Moff Tarkin has none of that. He destroyed an entire planet, 2 billion people calmly and deliberately, just to make a point. And the quotes tell you everything you need to know about this man. Fear will keep the local systems in line. Fear of this battle station. That's not a threat made in desperation. That's policy. That's a bureaucrat explaining his management strategy, and his management strategy is genocide. But the worst part? 4 words. You may fire when ready. That's it. That's the sentence that ends a civilization. No hesitation, no dramatic monologue, no conflict in his voice. He says it like he's approving a memo. Here's the thing about Tarkin, this wasn't a snap decision. He appears across Revenge of the Sith, The Clone Wars, Rebels, Rogue One, and A New Hope. His entire career was building toward Alderaan. Every promotion, every political maneuver, every power grab led to the moment where he could use planetary destruction as a casual demonstration of authority. He's not a warrior, he's not a Sith, he's a politician who turned fear into doctrine and mass murder into standard operating procedure, and that's exactly what makes him one of the most terrifying villains in this entire franchise. But even Tarkin answered to someone, and that someone makes Tarkin look like middle management Vader. Anakin Skywalker was the chosen one, the most gifted Jedi of his generation, prophesied to bring balance to the Force, and he did, just not the way anyone hoped. Here's the thing about Vader, he's not some cackling madman who chose evil for fun. He's a warning about what fear, grief, and the wrong mentor can do to someone with unlimited potential. Palpatine didn't just corrupt Anakin, he weaponized his love, twisted his grief over Padme, and turned the galaxy's greatest protector into its most terrifying enforcer. Research scores him 78 out of 100, and that number is earned. Active participation in the Jedi Purge, decades of systematic enforcement of Imperial will, entire star systems kept in line by the sound of his breathing alone. That suit, the life support armor he's trapped in after Mustafar, is both his prison and his weapon. Every breath is a reminder of what he lost and what he chose. But Vader's placement here, second instead of first, comes down to one moment. He saves Luke, he kills Palpatine, he comes back. And that redemption is exactly why he's the most tragic figure on this entire list, because the hero was always still in there. Buried under decades of pain, mechanical lungs, and Imperial atrocities, the arc from Anakin to Vader to the father who saves his son isn't just a character arc, it's the emotional spine of the entire Star Wars franchise. But tragedy doesn't erase what he did, and the person who made him into a weapon, that's a whole different level of evil. Plague is. Every Sith Lord you've heard about in this video exists because of one figure. Darth Plagueis is the shadow behind the shadow. He's the reason Palpatine became Palpatine. Here's what makes Plagueis terrifying. He wasn't interested in armies or thrones or political power. He wanted something far worse. He wanted to break the fundamental rules of existence itself. Life, death, the boundaries that govern everything in the galaxy. Plagueis reportedly learned to manipulate the midi-chlorians to create life and prevent death. Not weapons, not super weapons. The actual fabric of reality bent to Sith will. He scores an 85 out of 100 on our ranking, and that's almost entirely because of what his research represents. His dark experiments and mastery of Sith techniques place him near the very top, even though his specific atrocities aren't as well documented as his apprentices, because Plagueis didn't need a Death Star. He was rewriting the rules of the universe from a laboratory. And then the irony. The man who could save others from death couldn't save himself. Palpatine learned everything Plagueis had to teach, absorbed every secret, every technique, and then he murdered his master in his sleep. That's it. No epic duel, no dramatic confrontation, just silence and betrayal. Plagueis finally got his canonical live-action debut in The Acolyte in 2024, appearing as a frail, shadowy figure. But don't let that fool you. Everything Palpatine built, every scheme, every manipulation, every horror we've covered in this video started with what Plagueis taught him, which means there's only one villain left. The student who killed his master and became the most evil force the galaxy has ever known, Palpatine. Every villain on this list exists because of one man: the Clone Wars, the Empire, the Jedi Purge, Vader, Snoke, the First Order. All of it traces back to Sheev Palpatine. Here's what makes him terrifying. He didn't seize power through brute force. He was elected. He served as Supreme Chancellor of the Republic while secretly being the Sith Lord manipulating both sides of the Clone Wars. He played the Jedi, the Senate, and the entire galaxy like instruments in an orchestra only he could hear, and nobody figured it out until it was too late. But the Clone Wars were just the beginning. He built the Empire. He orchestrated the near total extinction of the Jedi. And when the Empire fell, he still wasn't done. He created Snoke as a puppet to lead the First Order and seduce Ben Solo to the dark side. The sequel trilogy's big bad was literally his science project. Even death couldn't stop his plans. George Lucas once said, "Villains are characters who don't worry about the rules." Palpatine didn't just ignore the rules, he rewrote them at a galactic scale. He didn't want a throne, he wanted to reshape the very nature of the galaxy, and he had the patience to spend decades doing it. Score 100 out of 100, the absolute ceiling. From Phasma's chrome armor at the bottom to cosmic galaxy reshaping evil at the top, that's every Star Wars villain explained and ranked. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.